Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Ryan. I am based in Austin, and I've been a volunteer with Move to Amend for a little over a year. I'm joined by my teammates Greg and Janice, as well as Dolores, who you'll be hearing more from a little later on. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to share some information about what we call corporate rule, what it means, why it matters, and ultimately what we as individuals can do when we're just ready to scream at the injustice. The plan for today will be to do a quick overview of us as an organization, the problems that we're seeking to address, and how we're going about that. We'll hear from Jim Hightower on civic action. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening in Texas, how to get involved, and then at the end of our time today, we'll share a little bit more about our next event. In terms of Move to Amend as an organization, the core challenge that we seek to address is the issue of corporate personhood. Corporations are legal fictions that aren't mentioned in the Constitution. The U.S. Revolution itself was actually in part a revolution against the East India Trading Company and the taxes and regulations imposed on the colonies in support of that organization. Initially, corporations were created and defined by the people of our country and granted permission to operate via charters, which could also be revoked. And this is how the system was initially designed. These organizations have over time grown to hold power of constitutional rights, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But it's important to note that corporations don't need constitutional rights in order to operate effectively. Statutory rights, as you can see here, already protect the legitimate functions of corporations, primarily to transact business and to serve as a vehicle for the creation of wealth. None of these functions actually require constitutional protections, and we as an organization don't object to any of these. The challenge is that because of the wealth and constitutional protections that corporations have won, they're able to put their thumbs on the scale of our democracy. And it is this extra legislative unfairness that we object to, and it comes at a cost to us, the people, the citizens of America. I mentioned a moment ago that corporate charters under original design could be handed out and ultimately revoked, given a death penalty, as it were, if a corporation was deemed by a legislative body or the citizens of a state to have transgressed against the rights thereof. The important point here is that self-governing people define their creations. They're not ruled or governed by these things that they have created themselves. Over time, though, corporations have been able to escape democratic control, and they've done so in three primary ways. The first is by consolidating their power from the state up to a federal level, which gives them broader control over definitions. Corporations escape democratic control in three primary ways. Again, they first shifted decision-making up to the federal level, where they have more centralized power over the decision-making process. They shifted decision-making from the legislative to the regulatory arena, out of the hands of we the people, and then took that one step further from the regulatory into the judicial arena, which ultimately landed with these court-created constitutional rights. And because of the immortal and bottomless nature of corporations' wealth, gives them an advantage in the legal system due to the costs and time often required to settle these decisions. The core challenge then being that these corporations have been granted constitutional amendment rights, and they have used those to pervert or hijack protections initially intended for natural persons. A few examples of what that looks like. First and foremost, the hijacking of the First Amendment, which in 1976 decision Buckley versus Valeo, it was ruled that money spent in elections could be protected under political free speech. A later decision reversed Massachusetts law, overturned a provision created by the people of Massachusetts to prevent spending money to influence legislation. And then the decision that moved to amend actually was created in response to Citizens United, was based on neither doctrine of corporate personhood or money as free speech. It was actually around the right of persons to listen to speech regardless of source, and the corporation simply being an association with collective free speech rights. It has allowed direct spending on elections by corporate entities and has resulted in exponentially increasing money spent on elections, as well as the moneyed elite, and has created a more profound issue of dark money, which continues to worsen each election cycle that we go through. The Fourth Amendment, which is designed to protect individuals against unlawful search and seizure, has now been perverted to protect corporations against surprise inspections. Corporate charters previously stipulated that records had to be transparent to ensure public accountability, and corporations are now able to hide under the Fourth Amendment to prevent citizens from petitioning or seeking information to effectively regulate and police potential malfeasance by these corporate actors. The Fifth Amendment, where no private property shall be taken for public use without just compensation, has been used now to ensure that corporations are able to sue municipalities, states, or other collections of people in exchange for perceived lost profits due to some regulation. And this is used as a stick to prevent municipalities, for example, from regulating against fracking or cell phone tower location or other items deemed important to the protection and well-being of the people and the commons. There are several documentaries about this one on Netflix. The 14th Amendment, which was actually the clause under which corporations initially won these protections, equal protection of the law, originally passed to protect recently freed Blacks in the post-Civil War era, but in the years immediately following, only a fraction of cases brought before the court were in fact to protect Blacks at the time, African Americans. The majority of those cases brought after the creation of this amendment were by corporations who immediately recognized an opportunity to win rights for themselves as fictional persons. So with all this said, this being the problem we face, Move to Amend is a coalition of hundreds of organizations and hundreds of thousands of people committed to social and economic justice, to ending this corporate rule and building a vibrant democracy that's genuinely accountable to the people and not corporate interests. Our goals in pursuit of this mission are to first pass the We the People Amendment to make clear that artificial entities do not have constitutional rights and that money is not free speech, and in support of that, to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of democracy through constitutional renewal. We stand on a few pillars as we pursue this work. The first being anti-oppression and solidarity organizing. We believe that collective strength is stronger than anything we can do individually. Related to that, we are focused on coalition and movement building. To drive this movement building, we pursue grassroots organizing and political education, much like the event that you have chosen to attend tonight. Thank you for being here. And to allow us to pursue the course of action that we believe is necessary, we have built our organization through political and economic independence, allowing us to stay nonpartisan and avoid any sort of quid pro quo relationship or even implication due to donations from a potential conflict of interest. Unfortunately, Mr. Hightower was not able to join us this evening. We were disappointed that he wasn't able to make it out, but we did find a video clip of him speaking about the importance of civic action and steps we can take, and I'm going to play that for you now.
Molly told a story years ago about a state senator coming to Austin, got elected, came to Austin. And first thing he encounters, of course, is a lobbyist. And the lobbyist says, going to need your vote tomorrow. A bill on the floor. Here's $200. So the senator pocketed it and went on his way. Next day comes the vote. And he votes against the lobbyist bill. So the lobbyist grabs him off the floor and said, what the hell are you doing? And he said, well, the other side offered me $400. So the lobbyist just explodes all over him, you know, talking about integrity and ethics and keeping your word. I mean, and so the senator straightened himself up with all the dignity he could muster and said, well, you knew I was weak when I took the 200. So, but unfortunately, it's not about the occasional bribee and bribor. It is rather that the system itself is a bribe. And the powers that be try to tell you and me, see, you can't fight it. Just go with it. Because the lobbies will always plug some loopholes into any reform you come up with. Well, then those cynics need to go to Maine, and they need to go to Connecticut, or North Carolina, or New Mexico, or that left-wing state down here of Arizona, where they'll find that people have a reform that gets the corrupt corporate money out of the system. It's called public financing of their election, from state legislative all the way through governorship. If you're just a regular person, you're a cab driver, you're a school teacher, you're a farmer, you work in a bookstore, you would have an opportunity to run for office and win, because you would have access to a pool of public money. If you reject all private money, you can have access to that public money that makes you competitive with the incumbent. And you can use that money in the primary as well as in the general election. So it has a dramatic impact. More people participate, more women and people of color getting elected than ever before, higher voter turnout because ideas are discussed. People matter again. It's not just about money being spent on TV ads. It's folks going door to door. In Maine, they now have 83% of their state senate and 84% of their house elected without taking a dime in corporate money. It has totally changed the politics in that state. People like Deb Simpson, whom we write about. Deborah was a single mom working tables in a diner up in Maine. When you're working tables, that means you're getting half the minimum wage plus whatever tips you can squeeze out. Not exactly the ideal target that the system has for somebody to run for office. We'll take somebody working tables, a single mom, that'll be great. No potential to raise money, but Deborah, because had public financing, she said it was doable, and she's now in her 4th term in the State House in Maine, bringing a perspective and a viewpoint that has never been on the inside in those committee meetings and in the hallways and the discussions and things, totally changing the politics. And in North Carolina, for example, they targeted their judicial races. They elect judges there, and they do in Texas and other states as well. Very corrupt, because the corporations are now buying those judgeships. They put the money up, elect their judges, and then the courts then rule in favor the corporate interests over the consumers, environment, workers, and all the rest of us. So they targeted the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals races and spent 2 years educating the people about this. A big coalition came together to do this. Before they even introduced a bill in the legislature. And then when they did introduce the bill, the Republican leadership said, we will kill this. We will not allow this to happen, because they were backed by the corporate interests who didn't want this. And so the coalition got pretty creative. First thing they did was to hire a Republican pollster to poll Republicans in that state. 76% of Republicans favored the public financing of judicial elections. So that backed them up. But then they did something more clever. They had school teachers call their former students who were in the legislature to say, Johnny, don't make me have to come to Raleigh. And they won. They were able to produce this public financing for judicial election. The result in 2004, their first election cycle, there were 5 of these top court seats up for election. Clean election candidates won 4 of them. In 2006, there were 6 seats up. Again, they won 5 of those, including 4 women and the first woman Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the state of North Carolina. People making a difference, showing that it can be done. You can take charge of your own politics.
So, having heard from Mr. Hightower about the importance of taking control of your own politics, you may be asking yourselves, what can I do? How can I get involved? There are a few things, and the first is doing what you've done here tonight, educating both yourselves and other people about the issues at hand, how they impact us as individuals and as a collective, and ways to take action against them. I am going to add a link to the chat. Just one moment. I'm going to add a link to the chat for those who are interested in learning more with some of the resources available on our site. Those resources include a film called Legalized Democracy, some information, additional information about topics I spoke about previously, corporate hijacking of the Constitution, and the impact on us as a collective, a timeline of personhood rights and powers, as well as an exercise to better understand that, as well as some additional information about the First Amendment and a comparison between an amendment that we are supporting, the We the People Amendment, and a Second Amendment that seeks to address some similar issues, but we feel is not quite as strong as the We the People Amendment, HJR 48, is on a couple of different points. A second way to get involved is by advocating. We have a petition that we are seeking signatures on. Our goal for this year, I believe, is 600,000 petitions. Greg, please jump in and correct me if I am wrong. But I've just shared a link to that petition in the chat as well. There is also the opportunity to reach out to your congressperson and ask them to co-sponsor HJR 48. I've just posted a link in the chat showing the most recent list of co-sponsors. It is a searchable list. So if you know your congressional district or representative, please check there to see if they are a co-sponsor. And oftentimes petitioning them is as simple as letting them know that it's an issue you care about, and it is an active bill in the House. My representative here in Austin, Lloyd Doggett, a couple of people on the team here in Austin reached out to him, and as soon as we let him know about HJR 48 and what it stood for, he agreed to co-sponsor. And since that time, I believe 3 other representatives here in Texas have chosen to co-sponsor as well. The third item that I might categorize under advocating is asking elected officials who do not have the ability to vote in the National House to take what we call the pledge to amend, which says that they will do everything in their power to advance passage of HJR 48, even if they cannot vote on it directly. The third bucket of action that you may be interested in is actually taking some steps to organize. There are a couple of affiliate groups here in Texas, one here in Austin. Janice is in the process of launching one in Houston. We have had some activity in San Antonio as well. We often seek endorsements from organizations. I'll speak about this in a moment, but one example of that would be the Travis County Democratic Party, which shares a lot of the same goals as we do as an organization, even though we are nonpartisan. We have reached out to them seeking their endorsement and have also sought endorsement from private law practices and other groups. They do not have to be political. If there is an organization that you feel could benefit from elimination of corporate constitutional rights, please feel welcome to reach out for more information about how to seek their endorsement. I want to just take a minute to tell you a little bit about some of the practices that we have undertaken here in Texas to try to generate action in pursuit of these three items. Here in Austin, we frequently go out to farmers markets and other community events. Those in Austin may recognize the Pecan Street Festival. Basically, any place where there is a community gathering to educate people about Move to Amend, about HJR 48, and to seek their support through a petition. I mentioned a moment ago, we have been reaching out to state and local organizations to seek their endorsements. And most importantly, we are in the process of finishing a legislative session. We have been pursuing co-sponsorship on HJR 48 in this current session. And at the beginning of next year, our list of co-sponsors goes right back down to 0. So if you are comfortable on the phone or comfortable reaching out to a legislator, we would love your help reaching back out to the existing co-sponsors here in Texas, as well as others in Texas who have not yet co-sponsored, to give them the opportunity to do so as we begin the next legislative session in January. I'll pause here and shift over to Janice to have an opportunity to talk about her vision for working in Houston.
Here we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I want to go back to a quick historical moment, and I'd like to draw our attention to the work of Noam Chomsky. He has a book and a video that he did called Requiem for the American Dream. And I've been very influenced by that. And what he does in that is he lists 10 principles that kind of explain why we're here, what he calls it, and it gives us pause to think about the things that have happened to create the situation we're in now, but it's happened over a very long time. So I'll list the 10 things, and then you can contact us if you want more information on that. I didn't have a chance to write them into the chat, but the 10 things start with reducing democracy. Well, democracy is something that we've never really had in the first place, as far as I can tell. But what little we've had has been reduced even more. So the mission is to actually create democracy for the first time in a way that we would like to see it. Shaping ideologies, number 2. We've had an ideology that I've heard my whole life about demeaning people who don't work hard enough. They're lazy. They're unskilled labor. There's all kinds of demeaning phrases going around. And I think it would help if we just became aware of that and just decided how we want to look at the population. So number 3 is redesigning the economy. And we've watched that happen before our very eyes. We're living in a world of inflation now. We're living in a world of corporate rule. That isn't the world that I grew up in. So, let's redesign it back our way. And the Move to Amend is going to be a foundation for doing that. Then number 4 is called shift the burden. Well, the burden was shifted to the middle class, probably with the passage of the IRS Act in 1913. And it's been a slow progression of more and more burden on the middle class. The middle class is disappearing. That's me, that's us. And so let's shift it back. And we know where it's gone and we want it back. So number 5 is attack solidarity. And we can find solidarity and unity with each other. And that's another thing that it would be worth noticing and paying attention to, our intention to do that. And then number 6 is running the regulators. Well, we watched that happen in 2008 when the head of Goldman Sachs was made the Treasury Secretary under George Bush after Goldman Sachs had just caused the 2008 depression. So Hank Paulson. So, and then President Obama kept him on along with the whole financial infrastructure. So we haven't escaped from these people, and they actually run the regulation. They're the foxes guarding the hen house. So the 7th thing is engineering elections. And I think we've all suspected for a long time that that's been going on. We can probably think of a few examples of that. Number 8 is keeping the rabble in line. Well, I'm the rabble. And we're to be kept in line, but I'm not sure we're going to be so cooperative with that. And manufacturing consent is a really famous work that Chomsky's done, and he mentions this as number 9, where we read our so-called trusted media, but they only reinforce the corporate drumbeat. And so we become quite enchanted with it and possibly brainwashed. And let's pay attention to what we believe and what we listen to. So that's a hopeful note for the future. And then the 10th number is marginalizing the population. And I really think I'm done with being marginalized. I'd like to have some personal power, and I'd like to see all of my colleagues, all of my population colleagues, society colleagues, enjoy that same level of empowerment. And so I believe this is a movement to empower us, and I support it very much. And we have some movement from our congressional people here in Houston, and we hope that that can be solidified as well. I think Representative Lee, Sheila Jackson Lee has endorsed, and we'll certainly be talking to her to make sure she does again. And I thank everybody, and that concludes my talk. But if that has helped you maybe to find some sources of information that might help you understand, it'll be easier to do what we need to do if we understand where we are and how we got here, a little bit more about that. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, and look forward to seeing you in future trainings. I'm training myself too, so I look forward to it. Thank you. Good night for me.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Janice. Appreciate the overview. And now I'll turn it over to Greg, who's going to share a little bit about the work that we're doing at a national level.
Just there we go. Well, greetings, everyone. Appreciate you all being here. You could have been doing lots of other things like stringing highlights or making those god-awful fruitcakes or whatever else people are doing this time of year, but you chose to be with us for this hour. So I do appreciate that. I'll be very brief and just say that National Move to Amend, while it is a national organization that has upwards of nearly 500,000 people who have signed that motion to amend, and over 700 organizations that have endorsed, of all sorts, legal, people of faith and ethical persuasions, community organizations, environmental groups, health organizations, and over 700 municipalities that have taken positions, city councils, village councils, state legislatures, many communities that have come together to collect signatures on legal petitions to put this measure on the ballot in those 28 states that allow for citizen-driven ballot initiatives. All of that represents, while we're doing what we can at the national, to be perfectly honest, we will achieve absolutely and positively nothing unless there is a groundswell of support in places like Texas and elsewhere around the country. The history of social movements in this country from day one has been people who have chosen to come together deliberately in solidarity for a common cause, and risking time, risking effort, taking that investment and realizing that it's very important to bring about change and to drive themselves into the Constitution, really, where many of us and many groups should have been from day one, but were not. So for positive change to happen going forward, it's going to have to repeat the process that's gone on in the past. People coming together and forming social movements, and in this case, a democracy movement that has been unlike in breadth and depth anything occurred in the history of this country. You in Texas come from a long tradition of activism and of populism of the social justice and a small d democracy variety, not the other type of populism that's out there. The populists of the 1870s and 90s was born in Texas, and they were considered to be stupid farmers who didn't know anything, but who educated themselves and got on the other side of the learning curve and formed powerful organizations in Texas, throughout the Midwest, and put pressure on bringing about fundamental change. And they came up with their own sort of document called the Omaha Platform in 1892 that laid out sort of their vision, their affirmation of what needed to happen. Our We the People Amendment, HJR 48, is a small piece of what needs to happen going forward. We need, and I'm sure many of you are involved in organizations that are working against, harms to people, places, and the planet. And that kind of resistance, that kind of opposition needs to continue. But we ever and ever and ever continue to be on the defense, to continue to respond, to continue to resist, to continue to oppose. We need to propose. We need to affirm. We need to go on the offense. And that's a little bit of what the We the People Amendment is all about. That needs to be one of many changes fundamentally that needs to occur. So I thank you all for being a part of this call tonight. We're here to help you, as Ryan and as Janice have said, to do one or more of some of the things that have been mentioned, and look forward to hearing your comments, questions, suggestions, ideas, concerns. Hey, we're here to cuss and discuss, so feel free to open up and let's go forward and let's do it together. Because that's the only way we're ever going to achieve any kind of lasting change in proportion, equivalent to the proportion and the scale of the crises that we're dealing with. So thanks so much for being on the call.
Thanks, Greg. And yes, very, very much appreciate the work that you and Janice and everyone else are doing. I thought I would just surface again the different ways we might suggest you take action. There are links, again, in the chat if you are curious, but educate yourselves and others. Let others know about the proposed amendment, the bill in support of that, HJR 48. Seek co-sponsors from co-sponsorship from your representative, and as much as you are willing and able to spend your time, help organize it at a local level. It is only, as Greg said, action at a local, at an individual level that we build groundswell that ultimately generates the kind of pressure we're going to need to make a change in this arena. And that ties beautifully into our next event. Dolores, I'm not sure if this is something you want to speak a little bit about, but 1 month from today, on Wednesday, January 7th, again at 7 o'clock, we're going to be hosting a training specifically on how to reach out to educate and ultimately lobby support from your representative for co-sponsorship of HJR 48. Dolores, I'll pause for you.
Hey, whoa, excuse me. Hey everyone on the call, and thanks for the great presentation. And everyone, I was just like sitting here with the Chomsky quotes, just listening to them. Love Chomsky. So yeah, I will be helping with this. And if there's any questions that you all have, or if you're not able to attend, let me know. My email is dolores@movetoamend.org. And yeah, anyone can reach out to me about questions they have regarding lobbying. And yeah, I'm part of the national team. I should have said that first. I'm the legislative director. So, and thank you for putting that in the chat. But okay, I'm gonna hide my face again now because I wasn't expecting all the airtime.
Well, thank you, Dolores. I appreciate you chipping in nonetheless. So just by way of quick summary, the issue at hand is the issue of corporate constitutional rights and the powers that gives to corporations to tip the scales in their favor. Unfortunately, because of regulatory capture, there is no law that is sufficient. It's not about individual decisions. It has to be an amendment to the Constitution to clearly illustrate to the judicial branch that corporations are not afforded protections that natural-born persons are. And in our eyes, the only proposed amendment that does so effectively is the We the People Amendment, HJR 48. I'm going to put up contact information for 3 of 4 of us. I've just dropped Dolores' email into the chat as well. And with a little under 20 minutes remaining, I will cede the floor to people if they have questions or things that they want to share that they were interested about or came up over the course of discussion today. Thank you all so much for joining.
So can people ask their questions or make comments in the chat? Or if they want to speak, to unmute themselves? How's that?
Sounds good. Thank you, Greg.
So who has a question, a comment, unclear, agree with, don't agree with? I know we're good, but we're not that good. So you've got to have, I'm sure, some questions or comments or wondering how to get involved or anything else.
I just want to know what I missed in the beginning because I was late. Thanks for having me join, Greg. So I heard up to like what Ryan was, I don't even know what I heard up to, but yeah, so Ryan, you're in Austin. That's so cool. You got your local person to sponsor?
Yes, it was actually a teammate of mine, Colin is his name, reached out to Lloyd Doggett's office. And yeah, it was as simple as letting Representative Doggett know that HJR 48 existed and sharing the text of that resolution with him. And he immediately jumped on.
Wow, I'm guessing he's a Democrat then.
He is. He is.
Yeah.
Joaquin Castro in San Antonio similarly was very eager to jump on board. Sheila Jackson Lee in Houston, and I believe there was a fourth whose name is eluding me. And I do know, speaking of the pledge to amend, another teammate here in Austin reached out to Greg Kassar, who was recently elected as a representative for a new district here in town, and he took the pledge to amend during his campaign. So we're excited to follow up with him once he gets sworn in as a representative in the next legislative session.
Hi, I'd like to let Thomas know, I noticed your message in the chat about Eddie Bernice, and she's no longer in office, and she was replaced by one of the people that was highlighted by the Texas Tribune. There were 7 new Congress people elected. 2 of them were progressives, Greg and I can't remember her name, but you'll have no trouble finding her. And she has replaced Eddie Bernice Johnson's district representation. And I think you'll like her a lot, and it'll be cool for you to reach out to her in any way that you want to promote this. I think you'll enjoy meeting her or at least knowing about her. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, if I might real quick.
Please.
People may feel in some way intimidated. I don't know how much experience individuals have in reaching out to other organizations or public officials. But, let's face it, they put their shoes on the same way we do. And I can tell you right now that, and unfortunately, some of the early slides that Ryan had didn't quite come through. We will send that whole slide program out to you and everybody else who registered for this call. And I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I would lay a bet that if you familiarized yourself with just the information on the slides that Ryan shared with you, you will know more about corporate constitutional rights, corporate rule, and sort of how money became constitutionally, this bizarre constitutional doctrine that money is speech. You will know more about that than the person you will meet with if you so choose to meet with your representative, because it'll be an aide, which is fine. But you will know more than that person. I guarantee it, because they don't know this stuff. All this stuff has been buried, and what we are trying to do is unearth it, bring it to light, getting ourselves on the other side of the learning curve. And by doing that, educating. But, if these representatives don't see the light, then it's our responsibility to make sure they feel the heat. And that's what bringing people together is all about, in putting some pressure on these representatives. So I guarantee you will be more of an expert in understanding how corporations came to have these, never intended constitutional rights than they do. So don't be intimidated.
Thank you, Greg. I may use that as our closing commentary. I appreciate everybody who took time out of their evening tonight to join us. I hope this has been informative. Again, our contact information is here. Please feel welcome to reach out. And as Greg said, we'll share the slides and the recording with those who have dropped their contact information into the chat. Thank you so very much. And we look forward to connecting with you soon. And Greg, I'm just going to stay on the meeting for a moment longer to actually save the chat so we have access to it later. But everyone else, thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll talk soon.